Well, there was a bankruptcy in 1933, which was the real reason why they created the Great Depression of 29. To get people to beg for social insurance. Now, here in Canada, we call it social insurance. In the United States, they fought revolutionary wars and they fought civil wars, and they understood that security was a better word. It sounded better to the Americans, and so to sell it to the Americans, they called it social security. But they themselves call it social insurance, and that's what it is. Okay, so now having said that, I'll go back to this document, which you can get from the freedompool.org online. And this was a meeting. Okay, this is what House said. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property. That's the birth certificate. They will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer not being able to work and earn a living. The sin. They will be our chattel. That means slaves. It means collateral. You're secured as collateral. They will be our chattel, and we will hold the security interest over them forever. By operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions. Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, forever to remain economic slaves through taxation, secured by their pledges, the birth certificate. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial value designed to make us profit, and they will be none the wiser. For not one man in a million could ever figure out our plans. And if by accident one or two would figure it out, we have in our arsenal plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably reap us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations and leave every American a contributor to this fraud, which we will call social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur in this manner. Every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless, and without any hope for their redemption, we will employ the high office of the president of our dummy corporation to foment this plot against America. This is a certified true copy of my live statement of birth. You can get this by applying for it at the Registrar General. They'll give it to you. And it's very interesting because this is where it all began. This is the foundation document. All identification is generated from this document. And so if the foundation document is no good, anything that's made from it is no good. That means driver's licenses, health cards, everything. Now what they did here, this is exactly what he meant when he said, "Soon, every American will be required to register their biological property." Now, your parents didn't realize what they were doing when they filled this out, and these didn't exist before 1933. Birth records were recorded in Scripture, and these only came into being in 1933 when they hatched this plan. They created a corporate fiction with a name just like yours. In doing this, they registered and monetized the spirit and soul of a living being. This denotes ownership. And when your parents were tricked into filling this out, they allowed your spirit and your soul to be monetized. And futures were sold on you.
Spirit and soul.
Now, this is my birth certificate. This is actually a share. See this red number? This A, I'm born in Canada, this is a Class A share. Now, this is called a cusp number. And it said that the best slaves are the ones who don't know that they're enslaved. And we all have invisible chains on us, and we don't know it.
What truth? That you are a slave, Neil. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind.
We're talking about big bucks. We're not talking about hundreds of millions or even hundreds of billions now. We're talking about trillions of dollars. The obligation is immeasurable. Nobody can measure it.
This door's wide open now. It's gonna happen, whether you like it or not.
Do you notice that they have the same amount of ink on them? Do you notice that they're made out of the same virtually worthless stuff? It's paper. Did you get it? It's paper. When we create money, we have created an instrument of value that has no value of its own. And it's just as expensive or inexpensive to print the 20 as it is to print the 1. In January of 1913, in December of 1913, he signed the Federal Reserve Act, bringing the Federal Reserve System into place in America, and did what Thomas Jefferson said must never happen. He took the control of the money away from the people by taking it away from the Congress and gave it to a group of private individuals who have to pay taxes on the money they loan the government.
The thinkers, the artists, the scientists, the inventors stood alone against the men of their time. Every new thought was opposed, every new invention was denounced. But the men of unborrowed vision went ahead. They fought, they suffered, and they paid, but they won. No creator was prompted by a desire to please his brothers. His brothers hated the gift he offered. His truth was his only motive. His work was his only goal. The creation which gave form to his truth. He held his truth above all things and against all men. He went ahead, whether others agreed with him or not, with his integrity as his only banner.
When Allah spoke of riba in the Quran, He was speaking about lending money on interest. And we've explained why He has prohibited it. If you allow money to be lent on interest, then the rich will remain permanently rich and keep on growing richer. And the poor will be imprisoned in permanent poverty and grow constantly poorer. And if the one who wants to rule the world can get the rich on his side, then he will use the rich to control the poor, to control the world.
remember Live Aid in 1985, that symbol of concern and generosity? Did you know that during that year, the hungriest countries in Africa gave twice as much money to us in the developed world as we gave to them? There was another famine last year. Perhaps you were one of those who took part in Red Nose Day. Did you know that before that day was over, the equivalent of all the money that Comic Relief had raised in Britain, about £12 million, had come back to the rich countries? For every day this amount is given by the poorest to the rich has interest payments on loans that most of them never asked for or knew existed. In other words, contrary to a myth long popular in the West, it's been the poor of the world who've financed the rich, not the other way round.
Congress tells the Treasury Department, the Fed will loan us $1 billion, print $1 billion in U.S. Treasury bonds. So for $1,000, they print $1 billion of bills, of bonds. Those bonds are given to the Federal Reserve, $1 billion. Now the Federal Reserve in bonds plus interest. The Federal Reserve then gives the bonds to the government to pay its bills. But watch me, because you're not thinking. The government needed $1 billion. They borrowed $1 billion. But the Federal Reserve said, we'll loan you the $1 billion plus interest. But it only prints the $1 billion. So the interest payments are never created and put into the system. So how is the government ever going to pay them back?